He divorced his useless wife. Then discovered she was the billionaire CEO who built his empire. Most people believe Daniel Carter built his billion-dollar company from nothing. That story is a lie. 3 years ago, the woman who secretly built his entire empire was lying on the floor of their living room, bleeding, after he pushed her during an argument. She looked up at him through tears and whispered the words she had planned to reveal on their anniversary. "You were going to be a father." Daniel didn't help her up. He didn't even look worried. He simply scoffed and said, "Stop being dramatic." 2 days later, he signed divorce papers without reading them. What Daniel Carter didn't realize in that moment was that he had just divorced the woman responsible for every opportunity that made him famous. And even now, he still had no idea who his wife really was. The night their marriage ended began with rain tapping softly against the windows of their modest house. Daniel had just come home from work, frustrated and impatient after another exhausting day of meetings and investor calls. His company was growing fast, and the pressure of maintaining that success weighed heavily on him. Emily stood in the living room holding a small envelope. She had been waiting for him, nervous but hopeful. Their wedding anniversary was only 2 days away, and she had been planning a surprise that she believed would bring them closer again. "Daniel," she said gently, "we need to talk." Daniel barely looked up from his phone. Notifications kept lighting up the screen, messages from executives, investors, and his assistant. "Can it wait?" he muttered. "I've had a long day." Emily shook her head softly. "No, it's important." That single sentence triggered the argument. Daniel sighed with visible irritation. Lately, he had started seeing Emily as a distraction from the empire he believed he had built with his own hands. To him, she was just the quiet wife who stayed home while he worked tirelessly to keep his company growing. The conversation escalated quickly. Emily tried explaining how distant they had become, how they barely spoke anymore except when arguing. Daniel snapped back that she didn't understand the pressure he was under. Voices rose. Frustration turned into anger. And then, in one careless moment of impatience, Daniel pushed her aside while trying to walk past her. Emily lost her balance. She fell backward, striking the edge of the coffee table before collapsing onto the wooden floor. The room went silent. Emily curled slightly, one trembling hand pressing against her stomach as tears slid down her cheeks. "Daniel," she whispered weakly. Daniel looked down at her with annoyance rather than concern. "Stop being dramatic," he said coldly. Emily struggled to breathe as pain spread through her body. The words she had planned to reveal during their anniversary dinner slipped out instead. "I was going to tell you in 2 days," she whispered. "You were going to be a father." For a moment the room was silent except for the sound of rain outside. Daniel stared at her, his expression unchanged. Instead of shock or concern, he let out a dismissive laugh. "A baby? Emily, I don't have time for this right now." Then he turned and walked down the hallway as though nothing important had happened. Emily lay there on the cold floor, tears streaming down her face. In that moment she realized something heartbreaking. The man she loved was no longer the man she had married. The distance between them wasn't just about work or stress anymore. Something fundamental had changed inside him. And deep in her heart, she understood that their marriage was already over. 2 days later, their anniversary arrived in complete silence. Instead of candles and celebration, Emily placed a thin folder on the table between them. Divorce papers. Daniel glanced at them with mild irritation. He flipped through the pages quickly, distracted by messages lighting up his phone. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask why. He simply grabbed a pen and scribbled his signature at the bottom. In less than 30 seconds, their marriage ended. Daniel believed he was freeing himself from a woman who had become useless in the fast-paced world he now belonged to. What he could not possibly understand in that moment was the truth hidden behind Emily's silence. The empire he proudly claimed to have built alone had never truly been his. Many of the opportunities that launched his company into success had appeared mysteriously at the perfect moment. Investors suddenly returned his calls. Major contracts landed in his lap. Powerful executives treated him with unexpected respect. Daniel always believed this was proof of his brilliance and determination. The reality was far more complicated. Because the woman sitting quietly across from him was responsible for opening every one of those doors. And now she was walking away. Before we continue the rest of this story, take a moment and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us how easily success can hide the truth behind it. And if you enjoy powerful stories about betrayal, success, and unexpected twists, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Now let's go back to where everything truly began. 3 years earlier, Daniel Carter was not the famous CEO the world admired. He was simply an ambitious young man struggling to build a technology startup that almost no one believed in. He spent long nights working on product designs and business strategies, pitching to investors who rarely gave him more than a few minutes of their time. Rejection after rejection followed him everywhere. But Daniel possessed determination that refused to give up. Emily Carter, whose real name was actually Emily Whitmore, watched all of this from a very different world. She was the only daughter of billionaire investor Richard Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Global Holdings, one of the most powerful investment empires in America. Emily grew up surrounded by luxury, influence, and people who measured relationships by money and power. But she hated that world. She longed for something genuine, something real. The day she met Daniel Carter was completely accidental. It happened inside a quiet cafe far from the wealthy neighborhood she usually avoided. Daniel sat alone in the corner with a laptop and scattered notes, completely absorbed in his work. Emily noticed the intensity in his eyes, the determination that refused to fade even after countless failures. Curious, she started a conversation. "What are you working on?" she asked. Daniel looked up and smiled politely. "A startup idea," he said. "Most investors think it's too risky." Emily laughed softly. "Maybe they're wrong." That simple conversation lasted 3 hours. They talked about ambition, dreams, and the future Daniel imagined building. For the first time in her life, Emily felt like someone was speaking to her as a person rather than as the daughter of a billionaire. Daniel had no idea who she really was. To him, she was simply Emily Carter, a thoughtful woman who enjoyed listening to his ideas. Their relationship grew naturally. Coffee dates turned into long walks, and long walks turned into love. Emily made a decision that would shape both of their lives. She never told Daniel she was an heiress. She wanted him to love her for who she was, not for the power or money attached to her name. Months later they married in a small private ceremony with only a few witnesses. Emily moved into Daniel's small apartment. The daughter of a billionaire now lived in a one-bedroom home with squeaky floors and mismatched furniture. And she loved it. For the first time in her life she felt free from the expectations of wealth. But while Daniel continued struggling to build his company, Emily quietly began helping him in ways he could never imagine. She knew exactly why investors kept rejecting him. In the business world, talent alone rarely opens doors. Connections do. And Emily Whitmore had more connections than almost anyone. Without telling Daniel, she began making discreet phone calls. She contacted venture capitalists who trusted her family's judgment. She arranged meetings Daniel never knew she had influenced. Investors who once ignored him suddenly became interested in hearing his pitch. Daniel believed his persistence had finally paid off. Emily never corrected him. The first investment deal came only months later. Daniel celebrated like a man who had just conquered the impossible. "Hard work pays off," he told Emily proudly. She smiled and said she was proud of him. Behind the scenes, she continued opening doors. Corporate contracts appeared at exactly the right moment. Partnerships formed with companies that normally avoided young startups. Daniel walked into meetings confident in his abilities, never realizing many executives had already been quietly advised to give him a chance. Over the next 3 years Daniel's company exploded with success. Investors poured millions into expansion. Technology magazines praised his intelligence and leadership. Business analysts called his company one of the fastest-growing startups in the industry. The world began calling him a self-made genius. And slowly, Daniel began believing it. Success changed him. The humble entrepreneur Emily fell in love with slowly disappeared. His confidence became arrogance. The gratitude he once showed her faded away. Long nights at the office became excuses to spend time with his ambitious young assistant, Sophie Blake, who admired his power and success. Emily noticed everything. But she stayed silent, hoping the man she loved would eventually remember who he used to be. Until the night he pushed her. 3 months after the divorce, something strange began happening inside Daniel's company. Investors started withdrawing funding. Major contracts were suddenly cancelled. Partnerships that once seemed secure disappeared almost overnight. Within weeks, the empire Daniel believed he built began collapsing. He couldn't understand why. Nothing had changed. Except Emily was gone. Then one morning Daniel opened a business magazine and felt his entire world stop. The cover headline read, "Emily Whitmore takes control of Whitmore Global Holdings." Below the headline was a photo of Emily. Confident. Elegant. Powerful. Daniel's hands began shaking as he read the article. It revealed that Emily Whitmore had quietly stepped into the role of CEO after her father retired. It also announced that she was launching a new technology venture backed by billions in investment capital. The same technology Daniel had once built his company on. That was the moment the truth finally hit him. Every investor. Every contract. Every opportunity. Emily had arranged them. She hadn't just supported his company. She had built the foundation of it. And the moment he divorced her, everything collapsed. Daniel tried contacting her immediately. Calls. Emails. Messages. None were answered. Until one day he received a single envelope. Inside was a short letter. Daniel. I never wanted recognition. I only wanted love. You said you built your empire from nothing. Now you finally will. Emily. Daniel Carter had returned to where he started. With nothing. Except the painful realization that the greatest opportunity of his life was never his company. It was the woman who believed in him. And he pushed her away. Now here's the question for you. If you were Emily, would you have helped Daniel succeed in the first place, or would you have revealed the truth from the beginning? Let us know what you think in the comments below.